Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Never thought a Tuesday afternoon would change everything, but sometimes, life has a way of testing you when you think you have nothing left to lose. My name is Mia, and at 68, I thought I had seen enough of the world to handle anything it threw at me. I immigrated to America 42 years ago, with nothing but a dream and calloused hands that knew how to work. Every day since then, I scrubbed, painted, filed, and saved. Every single dollar that went into my account at American Trust Bank was earned through sweat, tears, and the kind of determination that only comes from knowing what it means to have nothing. The nail salon, where I worked for 37 years, became my second home. My fingers knew every ridge and curve of 10,000 fingernails. My back ached from bending over manicure tables, but I never complained. This was America. And America meant opportunity. It meant that someday, my sacrifices would matter. That someday came crashing down when my son Kevin collapsed during his shift at the warehouse. The doctors at City General delivered the news with clinical precision. Stage 4, lung cancer. 6 months to live without immediate surgery and aggressive treatment. The cost would be everything I had saved, plus more. But what choice did a mother have? I walked into American Trust Bank that Tuesday with a hospital bill clutched in my shaking hands and a heart full of desperate hope. $50,000. My entire life savings, carefully accumulated over decades of 16-hour workdays and skipped meals. The bank had always been my sanctuary. The place where my American dream lived in neat rows of numbers on monthly statements. The lunch hour crowd filled the lobby with impatient energy. Business people checked their phones, while elderly customers moved slowly through the line. I stood behind a young woman, complaining loudly about some fee. My mind focused only on getting the cashier's check that would save my son's life. When my turn came, I approached the window with the respect I had always shown authority figures in this country. Ashley, the young teller with bubblegum pink nails, barely glanced up from her computer screen. Her name tag sat crooked on her chest, and she chewed gum with the casual indifference of someone who had never faced real consequences. I placed my withdrawal slip and identification on the counter with careful precision. $50,000 for a cashier's check, payable to City General Hospital. My voice remained steady, despite the hurricane of worry in my chest. Ashley's fingers clicked across her keyboard with mechanical rhythm. Then she stopped. Her eyebrows raised slightly, and she leaned back in her chair with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Your account has been flagged," she announced loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "There's some kind of hold on these funds. You'll need to speak with management." The words hit me like physical blows. A hold? On my money? My legs suddenly felt unsteady, but I forced myself to remain composed. This had to be some kind of mistake. A simple error that could be quickly resolved. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "This is my money. I've banked here for over 20 years. My son needs surgery today." Ashley shrugged with the kind of indifference that only comes from having power over people who can't fight back. She called for Mr. Thompson, the branch manager, with a tone that suggested I was somehow inconveniencing her entire day. Daniel Thompson emerged from his glass office like a peacock, displaying his plumage. His navy suit probably cost more than I made in a month, and his smile held all the warmth of a winter morning. Everything about him radiated the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. He approached with measured steps, taking in my appearance with eyes that catalogued and dismissed in the same glance. My worn coat, my carefully mended purse, my hands that showed 4 decades of honest labor. In his assessment, I could see myself reflected back as exactly what he expected. Another elderly immigrant who didn't understand how the real world worked. "Mrs. Nguyen, he said, managing to mispronounce my name despite having my file in front of him. I understand there seems to be some confusion about your account. The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl, but I swallowed my pride. My son's life hung in the balance, and pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. There's no confusion, I replied firmly. I need to withdraw $50,000 for my son's medical expenses. This is my life savings, and I need it today. Thompson's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. He made a show of examining paperwork that I was certain he had already reviewed. Well, you see, there are certain regulations we have to follow, he began, with the patient tone people use when explaining simple concepts to children. Large cash transactions require additional scrutiny. We've flagged this account for suspicious activity. Suspicious activity. The words landed like accusations. Around us, other customers had begun to notice the commotion. Conversations quieted as people turned to watch the drama unfolding at window 3. Suspicious activity? I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've worked every day for 20 years to save this money. There's nothing suspicious about a mother trying to save her son's life. Thompson's facade began to crack, revealing something uglier underneath. His voice grew louder, more theatrical, as if he wanted to ensure everyone in the lobby could hear his next words. The source of these funds raises questions, he declared with obvious relish. Our system has identified this as a potentially fraudulent deposit pattern. Perhaps you should explain to the authorities how someone in your position accumulated such a large sum. The accusation hung in the air like poison. He was suggesting that my money was dirty, that I was some kind of criminal. 40 years of honest work, reduced to innuendo and suspicion. The other customers were staring now, their expressions ranging from curiosity to judgment. I felt something break inside my chest, but it wasn't defeat. It was the sound of my patience finally snapping. How dare you? I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent lobby. This is money I earned with my own 2 hands. I have every receipt, every tax return, every proof of deposit for the past 20 years. You have no right to steal from me. Thompson's mask slipped completely. His face flushed red, and his voice took on the tone of someone who had grown tired of pretending to be civilized. Now you're being disruptive, he snapped. Security! Before I could react, he reached across the counter and snatched my withdrawal slip from my hands. The sudden movement caught me off guard, and I instinctively reached to retrieve my paperwork. In that moment, Thompson grabbed my wrist with unnecessary force, his grip tight enough to leave marks. Don't touch the documents, he hissed. You're clearly agitated, and we need to ensure the safety of our other customers. The security guard, a tired-looking man in his 60s, approached reluctantly. I could see in his eyes that he understood what was happening here. But his paycheck depended on following orders, not following conscience. The entire lobby watched as this man in his expensive suit treated me like a common criminal. My paperwork scattered to the floor as Thompson maintained his grip on my arm. I could feel the eyes of every customer boring into me, their silent judgment adding weight to my humiliation. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about my money. This was about power and privilege, and the unspoken belief that people like me didn't deserve the same respect as people like him. Thompson wasn't just stealing my savings, he was trying to steal my dignity. But sometimes, when you think you're completely alone, the universe surprises you. Stop! The voice came from across the lobby, quiet but carrying undeniable authority. A man in his 40s, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, stood up from where he had been sitting with a laptop. Everything about him seemed ordinary, unremarkable even, except for the way everyone immediately turned to listen. Thompson released my wrist and straightened his tie, clearly annoyed by the interruption. This is a private matter, sir, Thompson said with strained professionalism. I'll have to ask you not to interfere." The stranger walked closer, his movement deliberate and confident. When he spoke again, his voice carried the kind of calm authority that comes from someone accustomed to being heard. "My name is David Chen, and this actually concerns me very much. What you just did constitutes several federal violations. Freezing a cashier's check without a court order is illegal. Accusing a customer of money laundering without evidence is defamation. And physically restraining a customer during a banking dispute crosses into assault territory." Thompson's face went through several shades of red before settling on an unhealthy purple. Ashley had stopped chewing her gum entirely, frozen behind her window like a deer caught in headlights. "You don't know what you're talking about," Thompson blustered. But his confidence was clearly shaken. "This is standard banking procedure." David smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested he knew secrets that would make Thompson very uncomfortable. "Actually, I know exactly what I'm talking about. You see, I'm an attorney specializing in banking law, and I also happen to represent VistaCap Investment Group, one of American Trust's largest institutional investors. We've been investigating irregularities in your branch's handling of elderly and immigrant customers' accounts." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thompson's bluster evaporated like morning mist. David continued speaking, but now he was addressing the growing crowd of customers who had gathered to watch the confrontation. "This isn't the first time Mr. Thompson has manufactured reasons to freeze accounts belonging to vulnerable customers. The interest earnings from these delayed transactions don't just disappear. They generate revenue for the branch while the rightful owners struggle to access their own money." From somewhere in the crowd, a young man stepped forward with his phone held high. He was clearly recording everything, his camera capturing Thompson's increasingly desperate expressions. "This has been live streaming for the past 10 minutes, the young man announced cheerfully. "About 15,000 people are watching right now, and the comments are pretty entertaining." Thompson's world began crumbling in real time. His practiced smile disappeared entirely, replaced by the wild-eyed look of a man watching his career implode on social media. David pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. "Hi, John," he said conversationally. "I'm standing in the Grand Avenue branch of American Trust, and I think you need to send a crisis management team down here immediately. Your branch manager just assaulted a customer on a live stream that's approaching 20,000 viewers." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of expensive cars, serious-looking men in darker suits, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. Thompson disappeared into his office with two executives who looked like they would rather be anywhere else in the world. Ashley tried to become invisible behind her counter, but her pink fingernails made camouflage impossible. A vice president whose business card carried more titles than seemed physically possible approached me with the kind of respectful attention I hadn't received from this bank in 20 years. "Mrs. Nguyen," he said, pronouncing my name correctly on the first try. "On behalf of American Trust Bank, I want to offer our most sincere apologies. Your funds will be immediately available, along with an additional amount to compensate for this inexcusable treatment." Within an hour, not only had my original $50,000 been released, but the bank had also deposited an additional $25,000 into my account as compensation for their error. The young man with the camera, who introduced himself as Marco, a journalism student, had helped me document everything for potential legal action. But the real surprise came 3 days later, when David Chen appeared at my door with news that would change everything. "The lawsuit we're filing against American Trust will likely result in a substantial settlement," he explained. "Over tea, in my small kitchen. You weren't Thompson's only victim. We've identified at least 37 other customers who were subjected to similar treatment over the past 2 years." The legal proceedings that followed felt like watching justice unfold in slow motion. Thompson and 2 other employees were terminated and faced criminal charges for banking fraud. Ashley found herself working at a fast food restaurant, recognized by customers who had seen the viral video of her dismissive treatment of an elderly woman fighting for her son's life. More importantly, Kevin's surgery was successful. The additional compensation from the bank meant that we could afford not just the operation, but also the extended treatment and rehabilitation that followed. For the first time in months, I could sleep without the crushing weight of financial terror pressing down on my chest. The settlement that came 8 months later was more money than I had ever imagined having. Enough to ensure that Kevin would never have to worry about medical bills again, and enough to allow me to finally stop working 70-hour weeks at the nail salon. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was the moment I realized that staying silent in the face of injustice wasn't dignity. It was complicity in my own diminishment. For 40 years, I had believed that keeping my head down and working hard was enough. That if I just followed the rules and respected authority, America would respect me in return. Thompson had shown me the flaw in that thinking. Respect isn't automatically granted. Sometimes it has to be demanded. The day I walked back into American Trust Bank to close my account was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. The new branch manager, a professional woman who treated me with the courtesy I should have received all along, processed my request without question or judgment. As I walked out with my cashier's check in hand, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: genuine pride in myself. Later that afternoon, I sat in the hospital room where Kevin was recovering from his latest treatment. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming both of us as we shared stories about his improving prognosis and my ongoing legal victory. "You know what the best part is?" I told him as he dozed in his chair. "It's not the money, although that certainly helps. It's knowing that I didn't back down when it mattered most. For the first time in my life, I fought back, and I won." Kevin squeezed my hand with strength that had been returning gradually over the past several months. "I always knew you were tough, Mom," he said with a smile that reminded me of the little boy he used to be. "I just think it took the rest of the world a while to figure it out." Now, almost a year later, I wake up each morning in a house I own completely, with enough money in my new bank account to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I volunteer at a legal aid clinic, helping other elderly immigrants navigate the same kinds of institutional discrimination I faced. David Chen and I have become unlikely friends, bonded by our shared commitment to holding powerful people accountable for their actions. The viral video of my confrontation with Thompson has been viewed over 2 million times. Sometimes people recognize me at the grocery store or the pharmacy, and they tell me how much my story meant to them, how it gave them courage to stand up in their own situations where they felt powerless. I never expected to become anyone's inspiration. I was just a mother trying to save her son's life, but I learned that sometimes the most ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary moments where they have to choose between acceptance and resistance. I chose resistance, and it changed everything. The best part isn't even the money or the recognition. It's the knowledge that I spent 67 years of my life believing I had to earn respect through perfect behavior and endless sacrifice. I was wrong. Respect is something you claim for yourself, not something you wait for others to grant you. Every morning when I look in the mirror, I see the same weathered face and work-worn hands. But behind my eyes, there's something new. Something that wasn't there before. That Tuesday afternoon at American Trust Bank. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's worth and won't accept anything less than what she deserves. That's a lesson worth more than any amount of money in any bank account. And unlike my savings, it's something no one can ever take away from me again.